My name is Julia Carter. For most of my life, I believed I came from a perfectly ordinary family. We lived in a white two-story house on Hawthorne Lane, just outside a small Pennsylvania town. The kind of place where mailboxes still had family names painted on them, neighbors waved from porches, and everyone knew which kid belonged to which family. I used to think we were normal, safe, untouched by the chaos that seemed to exist only in faraway headlines. But nothing in my life was ever truly normal, because buried beneath the surface behind every Sunday dinner, every family photo, every carefully chosen silence was a secret so deep, so dangerous, it would shatter everything I thought I knew. And it all started the day my grandmother died. The funeral, it was a cold March morning when we buried her. Evelyn Carter, my dad's mother, was 87. Tough, quiet, elegant in a sharp kind of way. She always wore perfume that smelled like lilacs, and carried a leather-bound notebook she never let anyone touch. As kids, my brother and I were convinced it was her journal, filled with old memories. We used to dare each other to sneak a peek. We never did. The funeral was small, tasteful, restrained, just how she would have liked it. My father barely said a word, and my mother kept glancing at him like she was waiting for him to fall apart. He never did, but something changed in him that day. I noticed it during the service. The way his jaw clenched when they lowered her casket. How he turned his face when the priest mentioned family legacy, like the words tasted bitter. Later, that evening, after the guests had left and the house had gone quiet, I found my father sitting in the attic, alone, holding that same leather-bound notebook. "The notebook, is that Grandma's journal?" I asked, stepping closer. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the worn cover like it might start speaking to him. "I always wondered what was inside," I added softly. He looked up at me with tired eyes. "It's not a journal." I frowned. "Then what is it?" He hesitated, then handed it to me. Inside, instead of memories or family photos, were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to someone named Margaret Whitmore. And none of them were in my grandmother's handwriting. "Who's Margaret?" I asked, flipping through the pages. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, walked over to the window, and said something that made my blood run cold. "She's the reason your uncle disappeared." The uncle who never existed. Here's the thing. I didn't have an uncle, or at least, I thought I didn't. I had grown up with one sibling, my brother Ryan. No cousins, no uncles, no aunts. My dad was an only child, or so we'd been told. "Dad," I whispered. "What do you mean disappeared?" He turned to me, finally, and the look on his face was haunted, like he had been living with a ghost. "I had a brother once," he said. "His name was Thomas. He vanished in 1977. We were told never to speak of him again. Your grandmother made sure of that." I sat down hard on the attic floor, the old wooden boards creaking beneath me. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because I didn't want this life to follow you," he said quietly. "But maybe it already has," whispers in the walls at night. I couldn't sleep. My father's words echoed in my mind like a riddle. The name Margaret Whitmore spun through my head like a whisper in a storm. Who was she? What did she have to do with Thomas Carter's disappearance? Why had my grandmother lied? By morning, I had made a decision. I had to find out the truth. So I began to dig. It started small, looking through old family photos and shoeboxes, searching for any sign of this mysterious Thomas. Nothing. No baby pictures. No mention in old yearbooks. It was like he never existed. But then I found a single photograph wedged behind a drawer in my grandmother's vanity. It showed a boy, maybe 10 or 11, standing beside a younger version of my dad. Both boys had the same sharp jawline, the same intense eyes. On the back, someone had scrawled in faded ink, "Tommy and David, 1965 Hawthorne Summer Fair." My father hadn't lied. Thomas was real. And someone, maybe everyone, had tried to erase him. The Whitmore farm's name, Margaret Whitmore, led me to a rundown property outside of town. The Whitmore farm had been abandoned since the 80s, after a fire destroyed most of the barn and left the rest of the land choked in weeds. Locals whispered about it, of course. They said the Whitmores were witches, that strange sounds came from the fields at night. That no one had seen Margaret since the summer of '77, the same summer my uncle vanished. I drove out there one evening, just before dusk. The red leather notebook felt heavy in my hands. Its cover was cracked and worn, and the faint scent of smoke still clung to the pages. I carefully flipped it open. Heart pounding, the first entries were dated from 1975, just 2 years before Thomas disappeared. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. The ink faded but still legible. It was my uncle's voice. His words, he wrote about feeling trapped, about strange things happening around the Whitmore farm. Strange visitors in the dead of night, whispers in the woods, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. One entry made my skin crawl. I don't know who to trust anymore. Grandfather says the Whitmores have cursed us for generations, that I have to stop Margaret before it's too late. Margaret. Her name again, and then a chilling revelation. Thomas believed that Margaret Whitmore was not just some eccentric woman but a member of a secret society, one that had been manipulating my family for decades. A society that dealt in betrayal, silence, and blood. His last entry was a frantic scrawl, dated just days before he vanished. They're coming for me. I don't know how much longer I can hide. I have to tell Julia. She has to know. If anything happens to me, find the red notebook. I closed the book, hands trembling. This was no accident. My uncle had been silenced because he knew too much. I couldn't keep pretending that my family's story was ordinary. It was time to dig deeper. But the deeper I went, the more I realized some secrets weren't meant to be uncovered. The farmhouse was still standing barely. Its shutters hung crooked, the windows long broken, the roof partially caved in. I parked at the edge of the gravel drive and walked toward the porch. Every step felt like a mistake. Inside, dust coated everything like ash. The wallpaper had peeled back to reveal cracked wooden slats. But tucked inside one of the living room walls behind a loose panel I almost didn't check was another notebook, smaller, older, bound in red leather, and this one had my uncle's name written on the first page. There was one place Thomas mentioned repeatedly in the red notebook, a dilapidated old property on the edge of town, 132 Elmridge Road. Growing up, I only knew it as the haunted house kids dared each other to approach. I never realized it once belonged to my family. Curiosity drove me there. The road was narrow and choked with overgrowth. The house stood at the end of a gravel path, shrouded in trees that hadn't been trimmed in decades. Vines coiled around the sagging porch. Shingles had peeled off the roof like dead skin. But it wasn't just decay, it felt wrong. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet, and the air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. Dust hung thick in the beams of sunlight slicing through cracked windows. Yet, among the decay, the house felt preserved, like someone had left in a hurry and never returned. In the dining room, I found an old wooden cabinet. Inside were yellowed photographs, handwritten letters, and a small rusted key. One photo caught my eye. A young woman standing beside Thomas. The back was labeled Margaret 1975. She was beautiful, with a haunting expression, like she knew secrets she'd never share. In another letter, written in cursive, Thomas, the society is watching. You must stay silent or risk the ritual being undone. You know what's at stake. The ritual? The next item in the cabinet was a map hand-drawn and marked with red circles around places I recognized. Elmridge Road, the cemetery near Hollow Pines, and shockingly my childhood home. Why was my house marked? A chill crawled down my spine. I realized then that everything I believed about my family, my town, my life had been carefully edited, censored, and rewritten, and someone had gone to great lengths to keep it that way. As I turned to leave, the floorboards behind me creaked, but I wasn't moving. Someone else was in the house. I wasn't alone. The floorboard groaned again. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears as I strained to hear beyond the suffocating silence. Was it an animal? A draft? Or was someone really in the house with me? I waited. Nothing. Then, just as I was convincing myself, it was in my head. A whisper drifted from upstairs. It wasn't a word. Not clearly. Just a breathy sound. Like someone exhaling my name. Daniel. I don't remember deciding to move. My legs carried me up the rotted staircase, each step threatening to collapse beneath my weight. The whisper came again, soft and strange, as if carried by the walls themselves. At the end of the hallway, a door sat slightly ajar. My fingers brushed the edge. The doorknob was cold, unnaturally cold. I pushed it open. The room was completely intact. Unlike the rest of the house, it was untouched by time. Clean, preserved. The wallpaper was still bright. A porcelain lamp sat on the nightstand. On the bed, a thick leather-bound book. Not a notebook, a ledger. I flipped through its pages. Dozens of names, dates and symbols. Some names had red ink. Some had been crossed out. Others, I recognized. My grandfather, my uncle, my father, they were all part of it. Of them, in the back of the book was a letter addressed to me, or at least someone with my initials. W. If you're reading this, then they know you've found the house. Be careful. The society protects its own. They silence anyone who remembers too much. Then, below it, a seal, the same odd emblem I had seen in the back of Thomas's notebook. A circle enclosing an open eye, with 3 lines extending outward like rays. Suddenly, the room went ice cold. The lamp flickered. And in the mirror across from me I saw something move. Not my reflection. Someone else. I turned. No one. But something had changed. The room felt occupied. The air was heavy, charged like a storm. Was brewing inside the walls. The silence was alive, watching. I grabbed the ledger and ran outside. The sun had dipped. Shadows stretched across the lawn like claws. As I reached my car, I noticed something etched into the dust on my rear window. You shouldn't have come. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove until I hit a roadside motel 2 towns away, a flickering vacancy sign like a sanctuary in the dark. The ledger sat on the bed as I paced the room, trying to decide if I was going insane, or finally seeing the truth. Inside the book, I noticed something I hadn't before. A folded map tucked between 2 pages. It wasn't a map of the town, it was older, crudder. It showed underground tunnels, symbols marked at specific points. One location was circled in red, behind the cemetery, near the old church ruins. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I followed the map's route. The forest was damp and unnervingly quiet. I reached a spot by noon, a rusted grate covering a hole in the ground. Beneath it, a narrow tunnel slopped into darkness. I pried it open. Climbing down was like descending into a grave. The air smelled of wet stone and something older. I turned on my flashlight and walked. The tunnel opened into a chamber, torches lined. The walls recently burned. In the center stood a stone altar, stained and scarred. Symbols from the ledger covered every surface. But what chilled me most was what I saw on the wall. Family portraits. My family, dozens of them. Generations. With dates of initiation. And next to some, dates of termination. My father's picture was there, but so was mine. No initiation. Just a question mark next to the word, unknown. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind me. I turned off my flashlight and pressed into the shadows. 2 figures entered, robed, speaking in low voices. The boy's still alive. He has the book. Then the watcher failed. We'll deal with him ourselves. They moved toward the altar. I backed away silently, slipped down another corridor. At the end of it, a staircase led to a trapdoor. Daylight spilled in. As I pushed it open, I was behind the ruins of the old church. Free. For now. 1 week later, we've gone into hiding. Changed my number. Moved cities. But I still feel watched. Every night, someone leaves notes on my doorstep. Forget what you found. But I won't. I can't. Because the truth isn't just my family's legacy, it's everyone's. There are people shaping the world from the shadows. And they will do anything to stay hidden. This story isn't over. It's just beginning.